Hey guys, welcome back to another Blender tutorial in the Spirited Away series, where in the last two parts we made the green screen thing be on a card, and then we gave this thing correct camera motion and put it in a basic environment, where today I'm going to be taking the environment and making it look realistic. That's what we're going to be doing today. So just a bit of a precursor before we hop into this. Two things. One, I'm going to be using a bunch of models from the Botanique shrubbery and plant add-on, because I'm not going to be modeling bushes and flowers for you guys. I'm not. So get Botanique if you want to do that, or you can make your own assets. And two, a lot of things in this tutorial are going to be like, we're going to click something, and then we're going to watch it for 15 minutes and just wait for it to compute. So it's going to be a bit slow on the computation time, but that's just, the way it is. So again, what are we doing today? We are adding in scenery, so this kind of nice grassy floor, of course these shrubs with flowers and all that, and then a couple other things like, for example, we have this volumetric box. For some reason I have black planes, and we'll explain all that, but you can see in this window that takes forever to compute, even though I got myself a good graphics card. We have a final scene and it looks pretty good, and then in part 4 we're going to render it and make it look super nice. So let's get from where we were to where this is. So let's continue from where we left off. Okay. So where we left off, wow, this is quite a downgrade, but we have a basic scene with the correct camera motion, and this means all we need to do is start like swapping out objects. So the checkerboard for the bushes, the floor for floor, etc. So let us do that. So starting off with the shrubs, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the Botanique add-on. Again, that's what I'm going to be using. You can use your own assets. And I want to basically spawn in a shrub that occupies these two kind of side walls, okay? To do this, I'm going to spawn an asset, and I've already have it selected. It's in the shrub section. You just pick one that makes the most sense. I picked the one that was the longest rectangular prism. So I'm like, okay, that's good. And make sure, if you are using Botanique, to make this editable, okay? This is important because I don't think it's going to let you spawn flower particles, which is what we're going to be doing, unless you've done that. If not, you can just hit the make editable after the fact. So there we go. We have a bush. Let's rotate it by 90 degrees and place it roughly where it's supposed to be. Luckily, I made it roughly the correct size. And of course, we're going to mess with how tall it is, etc. But for now, let's try to get this thing to be longer. The way you do this is you add in a bunch of copies, which is kind of a shame, because you can see, especially as we get close, this thing has a lot of detail, a lot of geometry. This is probably 500,000 polygons by itself, but whatever. I'm going to take this, I'm going to throw it through an array modifier, and this is where things start getting slow. But our goal is to get, these shrubs to mimic the thing. So first of all, let's rotate this by another 180 degrees just so it's facing the right way. And I'm seeing two things. First of all, I'm seeing a gap in between our instances of shrubbery. That's what the array thing is doing. So let's fix that by, instead of offsetting it by one full object, let's do it by 98%. So there's a 2% worth of overlap once it calculates. And you're going to see that this is now going to be clipping into that. This is going to be a rough tutorial. If it ever gets too bad, so with bigger changes, I'll start editing the tutorial so it doesn't take forever. But you can see now the overlapping's gone. And the second thing we need to take care of is it needs to be longer. So I'm going to make it, instead of 3, which seems about correct, I'm going to make it 4 long, okay? And this is going to extend it by 2 more, again doing that 98% overlap. Okay, cool. So we can now delete this one, and you can see if we play this, now there's a shrub on that side, which looks even better. Well, kind of, in Eevee rendered mode. We want to take this and copy it over to the other side. There's 2 ways we could do this. We could either put the flowers on this and then copy it over, or we could do an array and copy it over and then apply the flowers. It's kind of up to you. What I'm going to do is, to keep the objects minimal, I'm going to keep it all in one object. So we're going to add in another array modifier. So the purpose of this one is going to be to copy all this stuff that's already been arrayed over to the right side. So we actually only need 2, and we want it to be displacing on its local y-axis. So I'm going to set this to 0, wait for that to happen. Luckily, I've made a cup of tea for this tutorial, because I knew this one would be fucking infuriating, but whatever. Infuriating. Anybody want to go see the G.I. Joe's movie? I don't know. On the y-axis, you want to pick the number that makes it translate correctly. In my experimenting, I think it was negative 2.25, and it's a good thing I experimented because I don't want to, put in all these values and wait for it. But I'm thinking about going to see Snake Eyes tonight. So you can see negative 2.25 seemed to be about the right number. Okay, now we can delete this one. Again, a super important thing, why did we put the cubes where we did and then we overlap the shrubs over them? They're actually at the perfect spacing so that this green screen card never clips into them, right? We don't have any geometry intersecting. But you can see now we have shrubs, and don't worry, we're going to make them look good. One thing I'm noticing immediately is because of our camera positioning and all this, we kind of have too much ground exposed. So we are going to make a ground, but it's too much ground exposed. I'd like the whole scene to be brought up. And remember, we have the whole motion dictated by this empty. So if I was to move this up, that would solve the problem. Of course, we'd have to do it in keyframes because we already kind of blocked all of this into like 2 keyframes. But I'll show you a quick trick for this. So to get both of these keyframes to move up on the Z-axis without redoing them, select the empty, go to Delta Transform, go to the Z location. So Delta Transform is a second layer of a transformation. Delta means change. So I'm going to change the transformation by moving it up on the Z-axis, which is going to preserve the keyframes. It's just going to move everything up a bit. And we could have done this on like any axis like that, and it would have kept the motion, right? But now you can see there's still a bit of ground, which is good because I'm going to make the ground. So if we make detail, I want it to be visible, but it's not the whole thing. So I've moved it up. Let's make a quick ground, or you know what, maybe before the ground, let's scatter the flowers since scattering the ground is going to be pretty similar. Okay, so we have our bushes. How do we scatter things? Well, I'm going to basically be using assets, again, from whatever this is called, Botanique. Let's find flowers. F is for flowers. F. There we go. We're going to be scattering flower assets that already exist, specifically the pink one and the white one, since I think that kind of fits the color scheme. But because we're doing a particle system based off this, we can actually use its built-in scatter asset. So select this, which again is one bush with a bunch of array modifiers. Click Scatter Assets. I'm going to make a new particle. So basically this is what it's doing behind the scenes, is making a hair particle system. But I'm going to make a new particle system, select New, because I don't want to use any of these default grass ones. I want to make my own. So I'm going to select New. We could call this Flowers, since that's what it's going to be. Click OK. It's going to think about that for a second. And then what we can do is we can pick what types of objects we want instanced in the particle system. So once you have your particle system, go to the objects in it, which can be a bunch. It's a collection. And I'm just going to start picking out some flowers. So let's start with these white ones. And this is where the loading times get a bit crazy. Nothing insane, maybe not worth cutting, but it does get a bit crazy. Oh, by the way, one thing you're going to notice is that it only copies on the first shrub that we made, and everything else is not taken care of. I'll tell you how to fix this in a second because it's actually a pretty cool solution. But we have this. I also want to scatter some of these. Let's scroll down. Some of these tulips. I'm going to pick the ones that look the most open, since that, again, matches the Spirited Away scene the most out of any of these. And you can pick a bunch of flowers, and you can actually pick the ratio of how much there are. So you could have there be twice as many daisies as tulips if you just change these numbers, but whatever. Okay, so I'm seeing we got the thing on the shrub. What we do not have is it on anything else. So why is it that the particle system's here and it's not being propagated? Well, again, our shrub basically has a bunch of modifiers applied. First, we have an array to make it a bunch of shrubs, then another array to have it be on both sides, and then behind the scenes, we have this particle system being added. So you might think, okay, we already have the arrays, why is it not working? It's because in the particle system, there's a quick little setting that you might not know about. In source, so again, this is our flowers. You want to click Use Modifier Stack. This basically means how is it going to spawn? Well, it's going to account for the array modifiers that we added already. So that's what Use Modifier Stack means. And you can see now that it's loaded, it will now distribute across our whole mesh. Now, it is going to use the same number of particles, which means it's going to be sparser. Like there were a lot more flowers on this first shrub, but now we're distributing it over a lot. So we will need to increase our particle count. So we need to do a couple things. So we need to increase our particles. We need to make it so that not all the tulips are facing directly up. It's weird. And a couple other things. So for the number of particles, or you know what, first let's do the other things, then do the particles. So to get them to not all face forwards, go to rotation, set it to normal. Again, it's just doing things that you could do here in the particle system. This is going to spawn the particle, so it's going normal to the face that it's generated on, which will make it look a bit more random. Another thing we can do is a bit of scale randomness. So not every single flower or particle is spawned with the same size. So some are bigger, some are smaller. So I'm adding 50% variation here. And you can mess around with this more. And then finally, for the particle number, how many flowers do we want? I'm going to triple it. And you could get even crazier and play with as many as you want. Of course, the more you add, the slower it's going to be, as you might expect. But just for a demo scene, I think this is fine. So you can see it's actually pretty good in playback. It's just like setting it up that takes forever. Okay, so now we have this. We're going to light it eventually and make it look good because right now we have all this detail that's kind of going to waste. But it exists. Okay. Next order of business, since we have a couple things to go through, let's make the ground. So for the ground, I'm just going to make a plane, scale it up so it's, slightly bigger than our left and right points. I'm also going to take this ground, have it propagate all the way over here. Now, by the way, the nice thing about the way we have this set up is we have our actor perfectly blocking the middle, which is intentional, right? That's probably why it was animated that way in Spirited Away. But also for our 3D scene, it means we don't have to have this keep going off for like infinity or more, because that would require more geometry. We have this guy blocking it, so it's actually perfect. So with our ground, I'm now going to displace it. I don't want it to be perfectly flat, so I need to add in some geometry. Control R for loop cuts. It doesn't need to be that many. Just enough to give us the impression of hills and all that. So once you have your geometry, we're going to add in a bit of randomness with the displace modifier, with the texture, and what texture is going to drive our displacement? A cloud one. If you've never seen this technique before, what we're doing is we're using a texture, specifically this one that we can control. I'm just going to increase the scale on this and make it shade smooth. We're using a texture to define how much deformation there should be up and down. Let's actually subdivide it one more time so we just have a bit more detail. And you can see now our ground is a bit like that. So I don't need it to be too chaotic. So I just turn down the displacement strength, and I'm just going to bring this up so it's actually intersecting with the where the shrubs are touching the floor. And you can see we now have we have a floor. Couple things I want to do to this. First of all, I wanted to make it look good, right? Because if it's being seen every once in a while, it should be looking good. To do this, I'm now going to, basically what we did last time, but this time a bit more streamlined. What I want to do is I want to make a grass particle system. So I'm going to scatter assets. Again, you just click scatter assets. I'm going to add a particle system. This time we're going to use one of the built-in ones because there's actually some good ones. I'm going to pick a grass that has some flowers in it just because of the flower theme. And you can see automatically it does all the work that we already did, right? It adds in all the models for this, picks some settings, whatever. But you can see now whenever the floor is exposed, it's going to have some detail. Another thing is if the ground itself is showing, and not the particles, the ground itself, I want the ground to not be white as it is right now. So I'm just going to make a material. I'm going to call it ground, and the ground is going to be, maybe it's easier to see this way, the ground is going to be darker, and it's going to be brown, which when it pokes through the grass is going to look a bit better. We can make it even darker. There we go. So now we basically have all our geometry in the sense of vegetation laid down. And now comes kind of the difficult part of making this look good. But again, we already have the good camera motion and everything. So on to phase 2 of this tutorial, which means we are now switching over to cycles. Oh yes, so get ready for some slow compute times. It's mainly going to take the most time computing this for the very first time, just getting this scene ready, but then afterwards any change we make shouldn't take that long. Okay, so this is what we are working with. It looks basically horrible because of the lighting situation we have. So I'm going to start off by fixing that. So I'm just going to get rid of all my lights. So right now we have the scene with the camera motion, with everything else, and it's only being lit by this gray environment. So I'm going to start off by adding an HDRI. Yep, it's doing some weird stuff. I'm just going to open up my shader editor over here. The reason I'm doing that is so that I don't have to go back to this workspace and reload cycles and all this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the shader editor, go to the world tab, which is where we select our environment. For the background, hit Control-T if you have Node Wrangler. If not, just add in a environment texture node. And for the environment, I'm just going to be using an HDRI found off of HDRI Haven, this cloud layers one. You basically want to pick a sky that has the right lighting conditions for your scene. In my case, I want there to be Let me go out of this view. I want there to be a sun, but I don't want it to be a perfectly clear sky, so that's why I picked this. And you could rotate your HDRI to get different looks. So for example, you can take your rotation, increase it by 180 degrees, and now you can see the shadowing is on a different area. For now, I'm just going to keep it at default. Already, it's looking a lot better. You can start seeing a lot of the details here, etc. But I really want to give this scene a lot of dimension, a lot of depth, and a lot more realism because it still looks kind of whatever. So a big trick for that, which sadly takes a long time to compute, is always adding in some volumetric. So I'm going to add in a cube, and you could do this just in the World tab, but what I prefer is actually doing all of this inside a cube. So I'm just going to add in some fog only within the bounds of this cube. So I'm going to basically make this thing so it stretches across our whole scene. And you want to make sure it goes back far enough so that the camera is actually inside of it. And you can see what it's going to do is it's going to make our scene perfectly black. Of course it would. Our camera's inside of it. There's no lights. We're not going to see anything. So for this object, I'm going to give it a material. I'm going to call this a fog material. And I'm sorry I have all these windows open up here. It's just that, you know, it's faster this way. For this one, I'm going to give it a volumetric material. So principled BSDF, or principled volume BSDF. Take that, connect it to the volume. You can see now we're kind of seeing a tiny bit. It's just a very, very dense haze. So we take the density. How thick is this volumetric? And you bring it down to 0.1, 10%. So you can see this does a couple things. One, we can actually see what's going on because the haze isn't so dense that light isn't reaching through. Second of all, light is actually reaching through. And third of all, it gives our scene a lot of depth. And that makes sense. Of course it would. So I think for my density, I'm going to keep it at like 0.125. I think that's what I did originally. And we can actually give it a color. So I'm going to give it kind of a warm summer kind of vibe to it. So it's just slightly tinted orange, which I don't know if it's realistic. This is more like a wasteland kind of volumetric, but whatever. Another thing you can do, which I don't think I'm going to follow through for this tutorial, but instead of just having your volumetric just be the same density everywhere, what you could do is you could have it so that some areas are more or less dense, and I just want to show you the way you would do that. You do it by adding in a noise texture, and you can actually use this to drive the density. And then you can multiply it by, so we know that, for example, I'm going to add in a color ramp. We know that at its most intense, it should only be 0.125 or whatever we picked, so I can just put that in here. But we can bring this over here. Bring 0 closer, and now we're going to have areas that are dense and not dense, which is easier to see like this. So you can see it's not uniform, and you could plug it in like that. Again, I'm not going to be doing that for this tutorial, but it is something you could do. I just wanted to mention. Okay, so we have our volumetric. I just want to do a quick fix for our HDRI. So I like the way it's lighting our scene, but I want it to be a bit brighter. And a way to do this where you want to change the HDRI the way it looks, like the sky up here, without actually changing the lighting, it's actually a cool trick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this HDRI, so now I have a second copy of it. For this version, I'm going to send it through a hue saturation. I'm going to make it brighter. So this is a brighter version of the thing. And what we want to do is we want this one to be visible while this one's doing our lighting. The way we do that is we're going to mix these two together. Which right now is going to actually change our lighting, as you can see. So it's looking like a nice morning haze, especially the brighter we make it. To have it so that it's visible but not affecting, what you want to do is you want to do something special for this mix factor. And what it is you add in a light path node and you use isCameraRay. Don't ask too many questions, but basically this is a mask that when you view it, it isolates the sky. Don't worry about why. But what that means is that the lighting is the same as if it was using this one, but we're visualizing this one. So again, I could make this super bright, but the lighting's still the same, whereas before it would have been a bit different. Okay, cool. So we have this. Obviously, our scene, everything except the sky is too dark, and I will show you a fix for that. That also adds quite a bit of vibe to our scene. So before that, we have this big fog cube, so I'm just going to name that fog. I'm going to name our plane ground, you know, that kind of stuff. And maybe while we're here, might be a good idea to raise our fog a little. But My point was, so wait, first of all, let's take this fog visibility, make it, oh, I always forget. No, it's viewport display, and make it wire, just so it shows up but we can actually see through it. What was I saying? I wanted to add in lighting that really makes our scene like tie together. So what I want to do is I'm gonna set up this scene so there's kind of like a light source I'm walking towards at the end of this hedge maze, but it's facing me, so it kind of looks like I'm walking through a tunnel of light, which I think is going to give it a good vibe, especially if we have these volumetrics and it's going to make a light rays and all this. So the way we do that is I'm going to add in a light. I'm going to make it a sun, so it has kind of like infinite reach, right? It's not like a spot lamp or anything like that. We have the sun, doesn't really matter where we put it, but the important thing is I want it rotated so it's facing my guy. This will be more visible if we make this light stronger. So there you can see, we can make it even more intense just so we can really get the vibe. So it really looks like we're walking towards a tunnel of light, and the rotation matters. So you want it to kind of face our guy like that. And I'm gonna make it way less intense, something like 10. And we can make it a tiny bit warmer as well. So it's kind of like a warm light. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. So now it looks like we're going towards a light. Again, we're gonna make it look better. But it looks like we're walking towards this light, and this green screen card is going to basically break up these light rays and give it a very dynamic lighting situation. Before we continue, I just want to mess with some settings. So I'm going to go to color management, and I want to do a tiny bit of color grading, as you can see. So I'm just going to pick a gamma value that kind of looks a bit cool. I don't have too much rationale for what numbers I'm picking. I'm just picking two values that make it a bit brighter, a bit more intense, stuff like that. Medium contrast. Okay. That's a start. Now we want to really dial in our lighting until it's looking really, really good. So I'm going to bump up the sun. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add in that light that we had before that I kind of ditched, the one that was following this. I want to add in a tiny bit of backlighting because right now all the light is in front of our character, which makes the guy look very washed out, right? Makes sense. Kind of like a silhouette. So I'm going to add in a point light, kind of put it behind our guy. And again, we want it to follow with our card. So just parent it to the empty. And now let's mess around with this empty, or not the empty, the light. The light, I want it to be a bit brighter. So you can see, this is, where is the light? It's in the empty. This is without, it's very dark, and this is with. It adds a bit of dimension, and just to really make it pop out, I'm gonna make it kind of blue. So like the foreground is blue, the background's red, or warm orange. And you can see already our scene has a lot more readability. Another thing we can do to have it have a stupid amount of readability, and what I'm about to do, you're going to think, how is this going to help? But this is literally what's going to make the scene look good. We are going to add in some cards, basically just black cards, basically planes that just have a black material on them. We don't want any light passing through or whatever. We're going to add these in very strategic spots, and you're going to see how much this improves the scene. So keep this in mind. It's kind of this washed out thing. So let's make our kind of, it's not really a bounce card. It's almost the opposite. So the first one, I'm going to rotate this way. So it's kind of parallel with the hedge. And I'm going to make it so that it's going along the hedge. Why am I doing this? I just don't want any light leaking through. I don't want, one second, I'm just trying to position this. I do not want any light leaking through the side of the hedge. So I kind of want it to be kind of like an opaque wall. So I'm just positioning it like that because you have to imagine we have an HDRI. There's light coming from every angle. So we want to block off light coming from certain sides. For this, I'm going to give it a black material. So we can just call it black. And for this, make it rough and make it black. And now there shouldn't be any light seeping through this side. And so far, it's nothing crazy. Just wait for it, okay? So I'm going to take this and edit mode. I'm just going to duplicate everything and put it on the other side as well. This is just going to make it so that light isn't leaking through this side. And now, most importantly, I do not want light leaking from behind here, from behind the camera. I want all the environment light either coming from above or from in front, the way we set it up. So let's do that as well. So I'm going to add in, I'm going to add in another plane inside this object, as you can see, right? I'm going to rotate it, probably wireframe's better for this. I'm going to rotate it by 90 degrees, so it's facing this way. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale this up. So it's kind of occupying this whole back wall. Okay, I basically took this plane and played around with it a bit more. I made it a bit bigger and gave it a bit of an overhang. And now I think I can see a bit of a difference that I was talking about. So this is a with. This is the render you're seeing with. And this is without. It might not be immediately obvious because, there's a lot of samples that need to be calculated, but it just gives it a bit more direction, and all the lighting is coming from where it's supposed to. And if we were to take this sun and now make it even more intense, so now I can really dial in kind of the final look. So we can do that. We can also go to the color management and play around with our gamma a bit more. You can see this scene is really starting to tie together in a pretty cool way. So I'm just picking settings that I think look good. Again, a lot of what's going to sell this is the post-processing, so everything we're doing in compositing, our render settings, etc. But just as kind of like a basic scene, we could just kind of play and scrub through it. You can see that it's looking pretty good. And you have to just imagine that this thing's in motion and it has motion blur, etc. But I really like the way this is coming along. So in the beginning of this tutorial, we just had a dude walking through some checkerboards, and now we have kind of a completed environment. And you can like go back and forth and kind of like dial in this lighting. And I might do that in between like this tutorial and the next one, because you can see this is without one light and this is with. So the lighting you choose really, really, really does matter. In fact, I'm just going to make this a little bit dimmer. It really does matter, but I think for this tutorial, we are now done. And for the next one, we're going to talk about how do you get this thing ready to render and make it look as fantastical as possible. So there we go. That was part 3, kind of a long one. So at this point in the tutorial, I just want to mention Patreon. It exists. There are some 780 people that are part of this Default Cube and CG Matter Patron. And what are they getting in return? Well, first of all, they are getting early access to tutorials. So if you are the kind of guy who's watching this episode by episode as it's coming out, you could have seen it pretty much all at once because I upload it all together. And then I make it only available for patrons for a bit, and then public release. So they get early access. You also get access to project files. So if you want the green screen footage I started off with, and maybe some of the blends here, and for any other project I've ever worked on, Patreon's a place for that. Additionally, there's also exclusive tutorials I upload every once in a while. Basically, if you are interested in supporting these tutorials or want some of those benefits, it exists. I only like to push it at the end so it's not nagging, but also, maybe you're more likely to do it because you feel like you've actually learned something and gotten something of value from this. But either way, I hope you learned something. And part 4, join me where we're going to kind of finish this off.